Now man, that bottle's my kryptonite. Brings a man still down to his knees.
All right, here we go again on the No Bullshit Show. I got the distinguished Marty Strong in front of me. I'm going to read his bio for the audience where we can understand what we're dealing with here. We have retired SEAL officer. He's not going to point out he was enlisted, which is the real deal. Combat veteran of Operation Just Cause. He can explain where that was. I know it well. Operation Sharp Guard, know it well. Counterterrorism advisor in Baghdad, 7 months from 2004 to 2005. Unfortunately, I know that place far too goddamn well. Author of 13 books. I can't read and write, so I can't talk about the books. And he's CEO of Warriors Haven USA, a very special organization which we'll cover toward the end of this, our back and forth banter, and a great, exciting show today. I'm a little concerned about this bio because it's quite too short for what this man has done. That's what I'll say. They're giving me bullet points because they think I can't read.
It matches my stature.
Yeah, I was going to say. I will say his bio is a lot bigger than this, but we're gonna talk about all kinds of stuff today. Welcome again, Marty, my friend.
Thank you, Marty.
Marty squared. Hey, we can make it some naughty jokes about this, but we won't. I will have one complaint, sir, before we get started. I checked out the SEAL weight room, and I realized that this is the heaviest thing you got. And so I was pondering that, but then from the SEALs I know, it's about right. And then because in my weight room, we would use this little thing only as a penis enforcer, but I will not talk about that.
I get that. What you're missing, though, our workouts are 1 set, 1,000 reps. So,
All right, that could get very heavy. And in fact, I'm sure doing buds, you'll take something very light and make it a miserable instrument of pain.
Anything. A wooden paddle, you hold it up for 3.5 minutes, you're shaking. Yeah. And then the penalty is if the paddle started to drop, get to a certain point, the entire class of 80, 90, 100 guys would go straight into the cold water and sit there.
So because of that.
So you knew you couldn't do it. Everybody knew you couldn't do it, but we'd play the game anyway.
All right. Anyway, Marty, I'm trying to think of all the topics we got to cover today, but there's a couple of them right out of the block. Who does your hair? You didn't see that coming, did you? See, look, this is why I'm asking.
No, I didn't see it. Usually the first question is, when you went into combat, which part of the Rhodesian vest did you put the hair gel? That's usually the first question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Fine. All right. Fine. Well, I don't really have to worry about these days. But anyway, welcome today. And we're going to go, let's talk a little bit about, obviously, your background, the whole SEAL concept. We see it all the time. We see the movies, we see the books. You've written several books about the special community, which represents SEAL and Spec Ops in general. Well, how, just the essence of it, why you give back? You're giving back now.
Sure.
And just the whole idea that brought you into the whole veterans world, giving back world, but just a little bit about your whole experience and then what you're doing today.
Sure. So you remember back in the 60s, 70s, they called what Green Berets and SEALs did unconventional warfare, which I think is a great way to describe it. And they changed it in the 80s to special operations. I mean, special operations could be, taking a tumor out of somebody. It doesn't really define it. Unconventional means the conventional forces can't do it. For some reason, the conventional force, you can't bomb it. You can't attack it with a ship. You can't send in a battalion or a division of Marines or Army infantry. Part of it is that there's not enough information about what the hell the problem is. The bad guys, how many bad guys, where are they positioned, how are they armed? And there's not enough time to get all that information. So there's carvings on ancient Assyrian, like 5,000 years ago, ancient Assyrian monuments in Iraq, northern Iraq, showing Assyrians breathing out of inflated sheep bladders to attack ships. So this idea has been around as long as warfare has been around, that you look at the problem, we can't do it with what we've got. We can't attack it with whatever we have. So how are we going to do this? If somebody comes up with an idea, says, what if we do something really goofy? What if we do something really strange, like Roger's Range? What if we come up the cliff that can't be climbed? What if we come through the swamp that nobody wants to go into? And that's the unconventional element of it, right? And that goes all the way back to all the wars we've ever had in the United States anyway, and pretty much every other country's experience. Now here's the problem. In between wars, when nobody's fighting, the conventional forces, which are much larger and well-funded, and that's where all the generals, the admirals, everybody live, they say, oh, that was really nice to have those guys. We don't need them anymore.
Go.
Because when the next war comes, we're going to win the whole thing with air power, sea
Tanks.
power, or tanks. And so they start destroying these special units. They disband them or they shrink them down to almost nothing, which happened with the SEALs at the end of Vietnam. It happened with the Green Berets at the end of Vietnam.
Sure.
They got rid of all the Warrant Officer Huey pilots at the end of Vietnam. Oh, we're never going to need those guys again. Who's going to fly helicopters into combat like that? So the conventional forces begrudgingly create the need for unconventional forces because they can't do the job. The second they don't need those unconventional forces, they get rid of them. Then there's a peacetime period, and then we go back into war or conflict, and they suddenly realize, okay, here's the job. It has to be done. If it isn't done, we're going to lose the battle. We're going to lose something. We can't do it. Then they reinvent the unconventional unit over and over and over again. So the maritime SEALs, the maritime special operations guys are unconventional fighters. In World War II, there were all these little mini units that were started. So the underwater demolition team, Frogmen, were started in the Pacific, completely separate from the Scouts and Raiders, which were Navy, separate from the Marine Raiders, which were the Marines, who were both going in rubber boats off the submarines to attack Japanese positions. Completely different from the naval explosive demolition units that were training at Fort Pierce to go in to D-Day, and completely different from other units that were created for the invasion of North Africa. There was no commonality except that they were all unconventional, special kind of groups. And at the end of World War II, Merrill's Marauders, there's all kinds of different examples. At the end of World War II, even though they had an illustrious history of kicking ass and taking names, everywhere it happened, the conventional forces got completely rid of them. and then when Vietnam comes along, Kennedy's looking at this and he says, okay, Kennedy was in the Pacific and he was, on a PT boat, and he was probably one of the guys, if he didn't do it directly off of his boat, he knew about the mission of inserting Marine Raiders or inserting Scouts and Raiders. And when the unconventional war in Vietnam was clearly unconventional before the escalation to conventional, the CIA had their teams in there in the Hamlet program, and it was being very, very successful, patterned after the Brits.
Just for the record, the CIA is always successful. Always.
Oh, okay.
Just for record.
I got it.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I always thought it was in lowercase letters.
Yeah.
So, RCA goes in there, copies what the British did in Malaysia against the communist guerrillas, which they succeeded. Everything's going great. And Kennedy looks at it and says, well, I think this is going to go on for a while. So let's expand what the Army's doing from just basic advisory stuff to something more significant. Well, that gets spun around. And he's supposed to sign off on this new special operations capability scaled out. And then he thinks, he's a Navy man, Navy Cross. He goes, wait a minute. Last time I looked at a map of South Vietnam, it's like 80% freaking water, right? Everything's water. You got delta, you got rivers, you got water from the Pacific all the way around it. We need a Navy unit like that. And he probably would have known about the Scouts and Raiders, even though they'd been wiped from history at that point. So he said, we'll do this, but we're also going to do it on the Navy side. And that's how the today's SEALs were born in 1962. And their first job was to go in and fight the unconventional fight against the Viet Cong. And they became very, very successful at it. The Green Berets went in and did the same type of thing, more inland. And Marine Force Recon did it. Army Recon back in the days of Sergeant Major Purdy and those guys.
That's right.
Going to Parrot's Beak and, crazy stuff. 6 guys surrounded by 1,000-man division. Just sitting there quietly, crapping in a plastic bag and taking pictures and doing KRC-77
back in the day
handset clicks to tell somebody,
Now if we showed a young guy there, they'd look at us like we're nuts.
Right. So then Vietnam ends, and they're like, okay, we don't need all these special operations guys. We don't need all these Green Berets. And the SEALs, we're already a small organization, probably had about 200 total. They said we don't need to have that many go through the training pipeline. And there's only 3 classes a year after 1971. So by virtue of that, the SEAL community starts to shrink. There was one class they called the Dirty 30. They show up in the East and West Coast teams. The Navy says we're cutting back on the number of SEALs. You have to cut 30 SEALs. So the two coasts picked the last 15 guys that walked in the door, and they sent them to the fleet, to ships.
That sucked.
Right? And then, like a year later, all this NATO stuff happens, and the Navy starts talking about all these different possibilities. And everybody in Europe and NATO, they have long-standing commando teams. And so the SEALs basically get a reprieve from being, decimated and shrinking to nothingness. And then Reagan becomes president. And when Reagan becomes president, he basically says, we're full on. I want twice as many SEALs, which at that time would have been 350 more SEAls. And the Green Berets, and you're like, 900. Go.
Yep.
And we've been able to sustain it pretty well since then. We haven't had that big gap in between, but the money kind of flows that way.
One quick question as you're going, because just for the audience, when they almost send classes, right? This many class, that class, right? For how many guys, because they think these numbers, they don't realize there's how many guys in a SEAL class and then how many usually pass.
So the numbers since 62 have pretty much stayed the same. There's roughly about 500 or 600 candidates that get screened that want to be SEALs. And there's like 20 different things they have to check off. Part of it's they have to have a high IQ, an actual IQ test.
But not as high as the Green Berets.
No, we don't use the Green Beret test.
Sorry.
That's way too hard. That'd be too hard to pass that test, which I think has something to do with blowing up a balloon and anyway, and then chasing it into the corner when you let go of it. So that 500 gets cut down to about 120 to 130 that are accepted into a class. Those guys starting physically, mentally, intellectually, all those things, they've checked all the boxes. They can get a top secret clearance, all these things. They're ready. They're at the starting block. The selection process is the first of three phases. And that selection process is just a brutal, nonstop physical punishment. And you let the elements and the sun, the salt water, the cold, and constant exercise, that fatigue, wear them down mentally. The instructors don't really have to say a lot. They can yell and stuff like that, but the problem is by the third or fourth day, these guys are dragging because they've been doing runs and swims and carrying boats on their heads, carrying logs. It's 6 miles of running just to go to 3 meals every day. That's not even counting, counted as a fitness event. So with boots on and full.
You're running to eat.
You run a mile down, run a mile back, lunch, run a mile down, So you do 6 miles a day on top of everything else. And then there's surprise inspections that try to keep you from sleeping. And so by the end of the first week, you lose about a third of the class.
Yeah.
They quit. It's all
That's the misery factor.
They just say, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Movies make it worse because movies make it look like it's cool and doable, but no movie or TV show is ever going to show a guy holding a log for 9 minutes, until his arms are shaking and everybody just collapses because that doesn't make.
And then you get punched for it.
Yeah, it doesn't make for good TV. It takes too long. So by the end of the second week, you're probably down another quarter. And then by the time you're at the end of the third week, it's the Friday before Hell Week starts, which is the next week after.
This is a warm up.
And you lose another 10 to 15%. So normally you start Hell Week with, say, half of your class, so close to half. So I had 126 to start in my class. We started Hell Week with around 58 to 60. It happens Sunday night. You get 3 hours of sleep from Sunday through Friday. And we popped out the other end. And I think we had 24 guys left or something. And some of them were so injured and so sick and everything that they got rolled into other classes. And you have 1 week after that, and then the first selection phase is over. But you're basically hobbling everywhere because you're so beat up from this.
Yeah, you're banked.
Then you go into dive phase, and then you go into land warfare, which is weapons, demolitions, tactics, and stuff. Because they don't start off as soldiers or Marines; they start off as sailors or civilians. And this is the same process going through. So you got 75 to 80% of every single class since 1962 quits before they get 9 weeks past the beginning of the course.
So someone says, I need 900 more SEALs. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of training. It's a lot of classes.
It's a lot of work. And
and you're not lowering your standards.
And when we were first, I was actually an instructor in the first phase. when Ronald Reagan said, I want 350 more SEALs. And we all came in a room and we said, okay, how do we do this? We need 8 classes a year. Well, up to then, they were only doing 3 classes a year. So if you had 3 classes a year, if you do the math, it took 1,500 candidates to create, 375 starting students to get 75 graduates. Now bring it out to 8.
Do the math.
8 classes, we need like 4,000 guys that want to be SEALs. There weren't that many guys. There was no recruiting program, and there were no movies back then. There was no TV shows. There were no books. So the very first thing the Navy decided was, well, we got to kickstart this thing. And so this secret organization that my parents had never heard of before, I just say, well, it's kind of like the Green Berets and the John Wayne movie. That's how I explained it to my family. We had to create a recruiting film, and we had to go in and put packages together for Navy recruiters to see what the hell SEALs were, and start from scratch in 1985.
Wow.
And try to, we never did get to, having 3,000 to 4,000 input. I don't even know if they've got close to that now. There's a lot of people that want to do it now because of the movies and stuff, but if you compared it, guys that probably had halfway decent chance, it's probably still 3,000 or 4,000 trying to get those little slots. So, and SEALs are being screened and they're being vetted for what SEALs need. Doesn't mean that whoever quit or whatever couldn't be a great fighter pilot or couldn't be a submarine.
No, it could be a great SEAL.
Whatever. It's just you got to be able to do certain things in certain ways in certain environments and take a certain level of psychological beating. You have to be this high to get on this ride kind of thing, and then they drop guys later on for academic reasons. They drop them for safety. You screw around with a weapon, you're gone. It doesn't matter if it's the second day before graduation. And then you can also get kicked out. 3 guys in my buds class got kicked out within a month when they got to their SEAL teams.
Just not adapting.
Or for being
Stupidity.
19-year-old, 20-year-olds
Doing stupid shit.
Drunk driving, stupid stuff like that. So, and then you have the training attrition, the injuries, the deaths, because you push so hard to reality. So you're not even in combat yet. And so if you take your original 126 guys that started your class, I think we have 9 guys left alive now.
It's very similar. I know on the Special Forces side of things, they start out with a certain number. Usually, now they changed it. Back when it was harder, and now you can enlist for it. Back then, you couldn't get in unless you'd already been a non-commissioned officer and you'd already served at 82nd Airborne or one of the Ranger units and all that. So you're already going in a soldier.
Right.
A friggin' soldier. And even then, the attrition rate was, it's not easy, especially if they say they spin you down, then they want to spin you up. A Green Beret's not made overnight. A Navy SEAL's not made overnight. A CIA officer's not made overnight. There's a long pipeline.
And here's the tough part of that. What 18 to 22-year-old has good judgment? So much of the training, so much of the challenges and the exercises that they're observing you and grading you for have to do with good judgment. Making a good choice, making a good decision, or being mature enough to have the ability to not take whatever's happening to you emotionally or whatever and act it out or shut down or...
I think there was an age limit in Special Forces for a while. I'm trying to remember. I don't know if it was the SEAL, but and I know in the agency there was, but there was an age limit, and but it worked because you had to be already in the service for like a tour or two, so you were already at the age limit.
Right, so huge advantage. MARSOC Marines, they're Marines before they go into the MARSOC program.
Yeah, and they're Marines.
Green Berets are Army, infantry, at least Army infantry.
Right? Minimum.
But from day one of boot camp in the Army and Marine Corps, they're learning to be an infantryman, a fighter. That's not the way it is in the Navy. And when I came in, everybody were coming from the fleet. The guys that were coming straight out of high school knew somebody in the family knew a SEAL, the word of mouth was basically where we were getting them, or we were getting them from ships. But they sure as hell weren't infantrymen.
They had no skill set. In other words, they could be a great stud cook.
Yeah.
And they want to be a SEAL. So that means you got a zero skill set, which is, for training, is probably good. Because once you get there, now you don't have any bad habits.
That's funny you went there. We used to have those debates all the time. If you had a choice between having a whole platoon of new SEALs, new guys, or a mix of old guys, and because the platoons were always a mix. You didn't want to have a complete green team, right? But anybody that's been around long enough, most of us would say, I'd rather take a whole bunch of guys right out of the box and train them my way.
Right.
Train them without any bad habits and any attitude issues. Because, I was enlisted for 10 years and then I was an officer for 10 years. And people have asked, what was it like trying to lead SEALs? And I said, it was like trying to convince 14 or 16 Napoleons that, this is the way we should go.
Yeah.
While they're arguing like this. No.
Yeah.
And because they're so smart, they're so motivated, and they care so much, and they're so dynamic in their presentation of what they think is the right way to do things. Sometimes the only way you could do it is, okay, let's do a rehearsal. Let's see if this thing falls apart. And then they go, okay, it was a stupid idea. It fell apart. But that was a cool part of being an officer, and being enlisted prior to that, I knew how SEALs thought. I knew how you get the best out of SEALs was to let them basically brainstorm the hell out of everything until you had to jump out of the plane or you had to step out of the plane. Yeah. Because all that brain power would go to waste if you.
Well, that's what makes SEAL teams special is it's value added. You take 6 guys and it can be equal to 30 because they're complementing each other.
Right.
You take all the experience and you impart. Obviously, you have your own. But right now, I understand you have a passion. You have a mission, helping vets, giving back, and you're still focused on the teams. So let's talk about that.
So myself and the co-founder of a foundation called Warriors Haven USA. It's added.com if you want to check it out. He was force
right here.
He was a force recon Marine for 8 years. We met in 1994, so we've been friends for about 35 years. He came up with this idea of creating a vocational educational focal point as a foundation. There's lots and lots of foundations out there helping with scholarships, with housing, with direct funding through grants and things to put you into college, and that's good. So we kind of found a spot where maybe it was a little underserved. So training or exposing veterans to vocational training in woodworking, metalworking, culinary, arts, also business. We have a business academy attached to it. And I just out of the blue, I was getting ready to retire from another job. I called him and emailed him in January of this year, 2025. And he said, hey, dude, you need to get your butt down here. I'm going to show you something I've been coming up with on paper and all that. And he shows me what he wants to do, foundation. Now, and we've both been on lots of charity boards. So we had a lot of experience at being on the board.
Knowing what works, doesn't work.
Right. And whether money is being used right or isn't being used right. Or and some of them, they just sits there in the bank because nobody wants to. Once you have it, they think, okay, we don't want to spend anymore. But they forget the mission that you're a pass-through. It's supposed to go from the donor straight to the end beneficiary, whatever it is. And also the kind of parochial fights between charities,
competition.
Some of them say, well, we're going to be all things to all people. And then they end up not being anything very, very, very good to anybody. So we're going to focus. And we're going to build a 9,000 square foot, 2-story vocational training center in Wellington, Florida. We have a 1,200 square foot training center right now. We've already got people enrolled in the business academy, which is all virtual. We're connecting with all kinds of experts. The experts don't have to be veterans, but they're all patriots that want to help. So we've got courses going on in AI and crypto, software development. Yeah, all these different things. And I mean, I've got so many people volunteering to either mentor or run these courses for veterans that I can't keep up. So that's really cool, So I'm the CEO of that Lash Up.
Huh. And now, you need money, right? You need money for this.
You have any money?
I know a guy with money. I know a hot lady with. No, we'll get money. The point is, if they want to donate to Warriors Haven, how do we do it?
The easiest way is just go to warriorshavenusa.com. There's a donate button on there. It's on every page, and that'll take you right through it. You can donate right on there. You can put a credit card number in there, and boom, it goes straight to our bank account. We start using it to help veterans.
Outstanding. Now, the other thing is, right now the focus is, I assume, in Florida. That's where the facility is. You said you have virtual.
Well, yeah. So again, it's all evolving, right?
Yeah.
So we've had some people talk to us about sponsoring outside of the state of Florida, that they would take a veteran to a certain level of kind of indoctrination to a particular thing, like metalworking, so they can cut and bend metal, like an HVAC, duct making, whatever, and then they'll take it from there. But they're in other states. They'll take them and apprentice them and pay them.
You get a basic skill
Right,
set.
because they all like the idea of veterans and their work ethic and their discipline.
Sure, they understand time.
Right, but you stick a veteran in the middle of a restaurant, doesn't know anything about restaurants. It's just a veteran in the middle of a restaurant. So you have to teach them how to do something, literally,
Right.
quote unquote, teach them how to bake bread, so they can have a functional contribution. And of course, the veteran wants to be a contributor. They don't want to stand there and just be the veteran the guy hired. And so we do all that. And right now, the only virtual component of it is the business part, which is easy because of Zoom and everything else. You can run almost any kind of training. And anybody from anywhere, Alaska could be on the same kind of training program as somebody in Florida.
And you guys, obviously, a big issue among our vets and especially our returning warriors is PTSD. Do you have some programs for that, or is that an ancillary process by which if a guy comes in, he's wanting to bend metal, he's wanting to learn a skill set, and you see that there's some issues? Do you obviously continue to support that, but is there some sorts of process where you help him in that area, or do we hope the main effort is the effort of learning a skill, being part of a team, is that success?
Two sides of the same coin. On one side, we don't have mental health teams. We don't have that capability, and we're not putting ourselves out there.
Right.
Come to us and we'll work with you on PTSD or traumatic brain injury. But we know all kinds of organizations. We know organizations on the TBI side where there's enough funding going to some of these institutions that they'll put the veteran and their family in a local hotel, nice hotel, give them money to eat and all that stuff, and the vet will go in for a whole week and go through all the brain mapping and all the sleep studies and all that, and they don't pay a penny. They'll even fly them there. So we know all these different groups.
Yes.
And on the flip side of that coin, any veteran, but let's say they come to the program, if we see that they're having some difficulty, or they say they're having some difficulty, then we basically do the same thing.
Right.
We'd hope that they get some kind of therapeutic value out of doing the things that we're teaching them to do, which is working with their hands or working with your brain. But even if they went on to continue the other levels of our programs, we'd connect them with somebody that can check out their level of PTSD, and if there's anything else that's causing it. If there's actually a brain trauma causing the symptom of PTSD. So if you're sad or depressed and you think you have PTSD because you were a veteran, it may be that you shot an anti-tank rocket one too many times and you've got areas of your brain that are damaged, and that's why you're feeling and acting the way you are. And that's a physical issue, not a pure psychological issue.
And it sounds like in your program, there's no end stop. Once they're in it, in other words, once you're in it, they learn the skill set. There's a relationship from then on, whether it be vocational or on the help side, on the emotional side, on the support side.
There's millions of veterans out there, and many of them have done very well in life. And I haven't run a single veteran that says, "Yeah, don't talk to me. I don't want to help them." On any level, I don't know. I've got people that are trying to volunteer their time, their services, anything else that they can come up with. So there's no end to that. And that means that once you're kind of in the pipeline and you've got all these people helping you, just like the whole issue of suicide, the person that commits suicide feels alone. And the best way for veterans to help them is to find out, get a veteran, phone tree essentially together and start rallying around that person and getting back in the sunlight. You let them know that other people
You're not alone. You're not out there.
Other people care about it. Not only that, I went through what youth went through, and I got through it. Here's how I got through it.
Yeah.
Or this is only temporary. You feel like you're a loser. You're going down this deep.
Don't think you're by yourself in this.
Yeah.
We've all dealt with it. We've all drank too much, got mad too much for letting that anger or letting those emotions out in a direction, or even worse, you bottle it up, you feel alone, and you go down that dark hole.
Right. I mean, it's not going to eliminate it completely, but that kind of level of engagement, consistent, continuous engagement for any veteran, the family can do the same thing. But I think veterans that have issues with their service open up and feel more of a kindred spirit talking to another veteran.
Absolutely agree.
So it's important that other veterans get involved in trying to help.
It's tough to tell your wife or another friend or girlfriend what it's like.
Yeah, because they see it from an emotional standpoint. You tell me, reason I'm having a hard time is I want to be back in the action. I want to be back killing, commies for Christ or whatever, and or Hachis for Jesus, whatever area you're from, right? And how's a family member going to answer that?
You don't love me? You don't want to be away from me?
Right. But another vet, yeah, exactly. Every veteran in special operations.
I feel you, man. I feel you, but guess what? We're here now.
Every veteran in special operations is thinking at some point in their life these days, that phone's going to ring and they're going to need me again.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Sorry, hon. I'm grabbing.
Like me, I'm broken, I'm old, but I got one more fight.
I'm grabbing my day pack.
I got one more fight. I got a dumbbell. I got a small dumbbell. I can still do this.
I'm jumping on that plane and I'm going to go do my best.
Marty, thank you. I thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing for our vets. And obviously, we want to have you back on the program and hear more and more about Warriors Haven. And for those out there, again, remember what he said, warriorshaven.com. Go on that website, click on that donate, and we'll see. Thank you again,
All right,
sir.
man.
Outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you.